Hey, Dave here from Powerhoof with another Drifter Dev Diary. Today I'm going to talk about sort of my puzzle philosophy that I'm using for the Drifter. But first I'll do a quick Dev Diary on what I've been doing. The main thing I've been doing is writing, which this sort of section in chapter 7. Rearranging a bunch of kind of the way the order things happen, and then writing dialogue. So it's not really stuff I can share very easily, unfortunately. But Matt's just been sort of working on this hospital room. So this was my original kind of mock-up, and he's been sort of turning it into an actual room. This one's an interesting one. I kind of drew it, and I just put these kind of interesting kind of shape to the lighting of the room, and I had no idea if that would map across to being an actual usable kind of thing. And so that's something Matt's been experimenting with, turning that into something that sort of has the same shape, but still works, which I think that's going to work really well. So like a more clinical kind of color scheme. We might end up the colors might tone down a bit, but for the final thing, it's just the first sort of, the first go he's sort of given me. So probably have a bit of feedback and then another round, but early glimpse at it. Yeah, I'm happy. I think it's going to work with the weird kind of lighting effect thing. I don't know what you call it, like the weird shape and kind of dynamic angles and stuff. It's kind of cool because there's a room where like the focus really just wants to be on the bed and stuff around that, and though the rest of the room is irrelevant, so it's kind of a bit more experimental. So yeah, it's fun. It's fun sort of having some of my sort of more experimental sort of sketches then actually kind of translate into an actual thing where I've got no idea what I'm doodling like in this sort of really low color scheme, how it will end up working. But yeah, I mean that's really it for the Dev Diary. I'm just kind of plodding away on the sort of chapter 7 stuff. There's the bigger chapter, so it's taking me a while. Let's go to the Dev Diary. Why puzzles? So this is a big sort of daunting topic. Also, excuse me if my voice is very croaky. I've had every disease known to man except COVID, I think it feels like. Still managed to avoid that. I'm constantly sick at the moment. Blech. It's very cold in Melbourne at the moment, which isn't helping. Anyway, yep, puzzles. So yeah, daunting topic for me because there's just way too much I want to say about it. It's a topic I think I've thought about a lot. I've played so many adventure games. Let's click over to this one, that'll do. Puzzles, what even are they? I'll tell you what they are. Puzzles are bad. Okay, well, this was my clickbait original title. Like, maybe I could use this like kind of clickbaity title. Really annoy people, get them all juiced up. There's a lot of people really like or seem to like difficult puzzles in adventure games, and a very kind of, I think, a very vocal minority. And obviously I don't really think puzzles are bad, but puzzles have some problems. Puzzles, I think, are the number one thing that turn people off adventure games when they remember them from when they have played them. It's like, I got stuck and I got frustrated and I just had to try every random item on everything. That's the only way to play it. Or I had to just look up a walkthrough, like turn the game off, go away and look up a walkthrough. Obviously that's not a good thing. And so, why do we have puzzles in adventure games? Because puzzles are good. Puzzles have a lot of really good, there's a lot of really good stuff that puzzles do that are really useful tools for a designer when they're trying to tell a story in this kind of medium. And that's what I'm going to talk about. I'll basically talk about kind of what I think, well, for my game, and I should give a disclaimer, every game's different. I kind of did, every game's different. Some people love having hard puzzles, some people love having easy ones. Every game should be different. There should be games that are really hard, and games that are really sort of smooth sailing. I don't think that's a problem. I don't think that's a bad thing. I'm not saying everyone should do it my way, but this is the way I think about puzzles. And I'm sort of the way I'm thinking about them as I'm making the Drifter. And so these are the things that I think puzzles should be doing for them to be a good puzzle that I'm happy with. And the first is they should enhance engagement. So a puzzle should give interactivity, get the player thinking about the world that the character is in, get them listening to the dialogue and engaging with it, so that they can solve the problems that the characters coming up against. That's probably one of the biggest things that I feel like is a real benefit. I feel is like one of the best things about the sort of adventure game point and click medium is that puzzles guide the player through sort of naturally as much as possible. Guide the player and give them a reason to explore this environment and interact with characters and learn about the story and the world themselves, because they're not just watching something, they're participating. Like cognitively, they're sort of thinking about the same things that the character in the game is thinking about. I think that really makes that kind of, it really fits and really works well. I love that about adventure games. The next one is to give the player goals, which is something I find. I find whenever there's a player playing a game, an adventure game particularly, and they don't know what they're supposed to be doing, that's when you have a problem. That's when their eyes glaze over, they're not engaging, they're like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. They kind of want to stop playing. They're not going to want to keep playing, or if they put it down, they're not going to pick it up again. The person playing the game wants to have really concrete knowledge of like, okay, this is what I want to achieve. I'm trying to achieve this. I haven't worked out how yet necessarily, but I've got some leads. I sort of know what I want to do. And puzzles give you a really natural way of doing that. You don't have to have a list of objectives on the screen like most modern AAA games sort of do. Like that's how they solve this problem. It's like, look at your objective list. Okay, go to this place, talk to this person, fight this monster. In a point and click adventure, ideally, that all naturally comes about through the puzzles. The player knows, I've got this jar that I can't get the lid off. Okay, I've got to. Well, that's a goal. Like I know I don't want to get into the jar. I can't get into it. How do I solve this problem? Like that gives you a little like goal of, okay, I've got something to do. You know, fix pacing issues or sort of deal with pacing. So, whenever in any story you have fast bits and slow bits, and you want the player to have a nice balance between getting a bunch of story dump stuff and exploring environment, and puzzles help with this again. Like it lets you sort of rein the player in a bit, so they're not just walking through this spooky dark corridor that you've made and just walking to the end of it and leaving. They're stuck there. They've got a reason to look around, and like they might not want to like look in this dark corner, but they've got to now because they need an item to continue, or they need to solve something. Good pacing will mean that people will keep wanting to play your game, and if they do put it down, they're going to want to pick it up again, and you won't have the thing where like their eyes glaze over because they've just, it's a bit slow, or that they're just like waltzing through all this like work that you've done, you know, all these beautiful backgrounds you've made. I guess story beats always need to be paced the right way. You want to kind of deal things out to the player in the story at the right pace, and that's something puzzles should be able to help with. And I mean that leads into the exposition. Puzzles are a really good exposition tool, which you don't get in most like AAA games, where story is dumped on you at the start or the end of a mission or a quest or whatever. So you're like in a point and click adventure, the story can be told as you're dealing with the objects in the world, picking up inventory items, being blocked by some obstacle. That kind of can become part of the story, and that's a really strong reason for the puzzles, and one of the things that puzzles should definitely be helping with as much as possible. Puzzles that aren't doing any of these things, I think, are a problem, and that's what I guess I'll talk about next. Puzzle problems, things to avoid. Puzzles are contrived. So this is, again, for the Drifter specifically, but I think in general it's not a bad thing to be thinking about. I don't want players who play my game to notice that there are puzzles. Yeah, they shouldn't notice that they're there. They should be just doing what they think a character would do naturally in that sort of scenario. So my main character Mick, he's a bit of drifter, but he's kind of a clever guy. He can do some MacGyvering stuff. Kind of, he can cobble some stuff together. So that helps a bit with like doing some inventory puzzles, but he's not going to be going in there and doing a jigsaw puzzle on a door, or like building some crazy elaborate contraption to do something quite simple like I don't know, make a sandwich, because that just wouldn't, like, if a real person in the real world wouldn't do it, it will just feel like a kind of puzzle that the designer has just stuck in there to get in your way. And that's something I, as much as possible, like to avoid. All of these things I do. Everyone, no matter your intentions, will do when you're making an adventure game, because it's impossible to have every puzzle be perfect, but things to sort of try and avoid. Unclear goals, yeah. So again, whenever the player doesn't know what they're supposed to be doing, you don't know, you don't even know it's a puzzle necessarily. Your eyes are going to sort of glaze over. You're going to maybe put it down and not pick it up, or just resort to a walkthrough because you just like don't really have that motivation to keep playing. And no signposting, which fits into that. So one of the best things to do, I think, with puzzles that are kind of more complicated or difficult is just to signpost them. And signposting means basically giving the player hints just more naturally in the world. So say you've got this jar that you can't open, and there's a really strong guy who maybe can open it because he's really strong. And this obviously isn't very hard, but imagine it was a bit harder. And signposting would be, bad signposting would be if when you try to open the jar, he says, the lid's stuck. And if you've got a can opener and you try and use the can opener on the jar, he says, I don't want to break the jar. And if you show it to another character, it says, they don't want it, So good signposting, and the way I think, the way I like adventure games to be done is whenever the player does the wrong thing, so they try and use the jar, they try and give it to the wrong person, they try and use a can opener on it, anything they try that isn't giving it to the really strong guy to open, is an opportunity for the designer of the game, me, to give the player a hint, rather than them having to just figure it out blindly or go and look at a walkthrough or just randomly try everything on everything. So if you're trying the can opener on it, it could say, that might break the jar. What I really need is stronger hands. Even just interacting with it, you could say something about, I'm not strong enough to open this, or it's on too tight. So it's kind of a bit more leading you in the right direction. And then maybe you show it to some random other person, and then if the player's doing that, they're probably completely stumped, and they're about to resort to a walkthrough anyway. So you may as well just say, why don't you try this super strong guy? He might be able to help you because I'm too weak. And that way you've put in place into the game all that kind of walkthrough stuff already, but only players who are really struggling with a puzzle and not knowing what to do are going to be able to kind of solve it, that are going to be able to kind of see those hints and need them. Bad puzzles can just drag things out. Times where you kind of know what's going to happen next in the story. There's a big locked door. The next thing I've got to do is get through that door. And you're just told, okay, well, first you've got to solve these 3 puzzles, and each part of that puzzle is going to have a bunch of other things you've got to do first. That feels like you're just telling the player, sorry, I know you know what's going to come next, but I'm going to make you do all this busy work first. And I don't think that's ever fun. I think it just feels like, they're just putting something my way. I've got to get through. I've got to churn through this stuff. I already know what's going to happen next. It's not kind of, it doesn't add anything. And lastly, bad puzzles are hard. And this obviously is the thing that everyone will disagree with. Well, not everyone. The vocal minority will disagree with, but it's also the thing which stops most people playing adventure games. I don't think puzzles need to be hard. I think a lot of the time when people say the puzzles in this game are too easy, like you really have to think about what they're actually meaning. And I think most of the time it's because the game isn't engaging. Maybe the puzzles aren't engaging, so that doesn't really feel like they're connecting with the game at all. Maybe the pacing is off, and so it feels like they just sort of walk through everything. One example is the first part of Broken Age, a Double Fine sort of Kickstarter adventure. They got, after the first part was released, they got a lot of people saying the puzzles are too easy, the puzzle's too easy, puzzle too easy. And my impression of that game as a puzzle person who's designed lots of puzzles and played like lots and lots of adventure games, was, I mean, I kind of agreed. It's like the puzzles are too easy on the surface, but really thinking about why it feels that way, it's not because, I want to be stuck. I wanted them to add things that I'd have to look at a walkthrough or just be stuck on for ages and then not be able to figure out. It's because there was a lot of areas where I would just walk through it. There'd be not much to interact with. There'd be a character holding a spoon and I'd say, hey, can I have your spoon? And they'd give me the spoon. And then I was like, couldn't they have put something there to make me really have to engage with this world and pace things out more? Yeah, so that's my impression was if they just added even sort of simpler puzzles, just more stuff, I don't think they would have had that reaction. And then the second part where they tried to remedy that, they did it by adding more contrived puzzles which were like weird and kind of interesting, but not in necessarily a good way, like a way that felt like, oh, they've added a puzzle here, and ones that people just had to look up and walk through, and they disengage with the game. So yeah, I mean, it's not an example everyone can relate to, and it's maybe just my interpretation. And honestly, it's so hard to get puzzles right. One of the worst parts about having puzzles is in adventure games is that the puzzles in your game will be remembered by the worst one. Like everyone knows the puzzle they hate or the puzzle they got stuck on. And when someone says, oh, what did you think of the puzzle in the game? That's the one they think of. They don't think of the 50 ones that were really interesting and like really you didn't even notice were there because they were just, you were kind of thinking about it and it was getting you engaged with the game, but didn't feel like a puzzle. You don't think about those. You just think about like, oh, I don't know what a monkey wrench is. They shouldn't have made me use a monkey wrench on a monkey as a wrench. Which, by the way, my impression, kind of that's a Monkey Island 2 famous one. I definitely am in the camp of, I don't think even people who knew what a monkey wrench was would have got that. So I don't think it's a problem with localization. And I think that one was just that most of the game puzzles in that game, you just had to click everything on everything and try random things. And then after it, you maybe got the joke. So that's the problem. The problem with that puzzle for me was it was just too obscure, even if you know what a monkey wrench is. Yeah, anyway, I think I'm getting off the track, but I'm thinking of looking at my notes if there's anything else I really wanted to talk about, but I'll show a bit of a puzzle from the Drifter. I won't sort of spoil it for you, but I'll show it. One other thing I was going to say was that people really are precious about that feeling they had when they were a kid, where they were stuck on a puzzle. Maybe they had to, they couldn't, they've been stuck for ages. And then while they're at school or something, they suddenly thought of something they could try that might work. And they rush home from school and try it and it works. And it's the best feeling ever. And people want to capture that. It's like this nostalgia feeling of like, oh, when I was a kid and like, I figured that puzzle out that was so hard. I finally got to do it. And that's something that I think as a sort of adventure game developer, you kind of feel like, oh, I really want to capture that. But I think that's a bit of a mistake to try and capture that, because I think really what made you so excited about that at the time was just regular delayed gratification. The same as like if you haven't eaten for ages, a meal is going to taste really good. I don't think if you're running a restaurant, you should force people not to eat for a day before they come to your restaurant. It's a bit like that. I think it's not because they really loved solving that puzzle that it's not because you really loved solving that puzzle that you were excited. It's because you actually get to keep playing the game. Because you don't have any other games to play, maybe because, back then there was only a couple of games that you had. It was a very different feeling. But it is hard because I totally get it, that feeling. I just don't think it's something that's really easy to capture anymore because people go to walkthroughs. People have a million other games to play. They're not lacking on. They're not really looking forward to the next bit of the game as much as you hope they would. Ideally, they love your game so much that they are, but it's possibly unrealistic. Yeah, I'll quickly show a puzzle which I really struggled with design of in the Drifter. So this is a section where... Okay, so Mick's come to this cemetery. He's trying to meet his sister. He's got doesn't have her details, but he knows, well, she's going to be at the funeral, his mum's funeral, which is why he's coming to town. And so he's like, come here. It's just before dawn. And he's like, okay, well, maybe I can find where she is. Or I'll wait by the chapel. Then you talk to this caretaker guy, and you've just been dragged through the mud and sort of shot at, and you're all stinky and homeless looking. And this guy's just a complete jerk to you. Doesn't want you. He thinks you're a junkie. He doesn't want you like hanging around. And he's like, people are going to be, people are going to be coming and going to this funeral service. I don't want any disreputable people hanging around. And he blows his leaf blower in your face. So he's a real colossal jerk to you. And he won't, and he threatens to call the police if you hang around. So you're like, maybe I can't hang around the front here. Maybe I can find where Mum's buried or whatever, and just wait there where she's going to be buried. But this was something that I was really struggling to find a non-contrived puzzle for. And I needed a puzzle which is a bit more open, but just for the pacing of the game. You'd just done a sort of more linear section. I really wanted something where you get to explore a few locations and have a few different things to do. So I've given the player a goal. Okay, they've got to work. They go up here, and the cemetery's too big. They can't find which grave, where it's going to be. They don't want to like, fall asleep in the wrong spot, or wait in the wrong spot and miss it or whatever. But you've got a map here, but the map's covered in graffiti. And so that's something where having having graffiti in this is sort of telling you something a bit about the world. It's a bit about, it fits in with the sort of urban grittiness. It feels like a bit of a natural, great, I've got to find where it is, but this map's covered. And as well as the map, which also shows sort of where the different sections of the cemetery are, you need to know where, what section your mum's going to be buried in. And so in here you can sort of see there's a burial register through the window, but the door's locked. And this is somewhere where I could have done that old like, there's a key, the key's in the back of the door, you got to slip a bit of paper underneath and stick something through to make it fall and pull it out, which is a big contrived puzzle. People either have seen it before or very rarely they haven't, and then if they haven't, it's like a fiddly, confusing puzzle. If they have, then they know what to do, and it just feels like, this one again. And the obvious thing to do, I think, for the character is like to break in. The character's not a bad guy though. He needs a reason to break in, because I don't want the puzzles to fight against who the character is. If he's not a vandal, so that's why I made this other guy a complete jerk, because he's refusing to help you even talk to you. You're like here to come to the funeral of your mum, and he's just being a jerk. He's blowing the leaf blower in your face. And so the natural thing naturally what the character and the player want to do is like kind of get back into him a bit, and so you feel like, I'm just going to smash this window and reach in and grab this. And that's really just the sort of that kicks off the next section. It's not that simple, the next sort of step of the puzzle, but like it's kind of adding engagement to this section of the world. You're not just like walking through to the next bit of the game where the funeral's happening and meeting your sister. It's like kind of put some obstacles in the player's path, so they've got to sort of think about how to get around them. So that's adding the sort of engagement to the world and interactivity. It's getting them exploring the different sections of the cemetery, and also you have to go back out into the city and get some other things. So there's a reason to be moving around between different locations. Fixing this pacing problem I had, where the player hadn't really got to interact in a more sort of open sense for a little while. And it's providing some exposition about the world. It's sort of reinforcing that Mick's like a stinky guy who's been hasn't showered for ages and is like and that there's a lot of people who are jerks to when you're like that, who just won't want to talk to you. So it's kind of it ends up solving those problems, but it was something I did spend. I reckon I spent most of a week trying to kind of work out this puzzle. I was really stumped on like how to get something that fits those things. And it's not perfect. It is still kind of contrived. But it's, that's kind of like an example of how I would try and do something, I guess. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Thanks for tuning in on the YouTube thingy. I'll keep Twitch streaming after this on Does on Drums, twitch.tv/doesondrums. But I'll say bye to the YouTube Dem Diary crew, and till next time, see ya.